Hello everybody, welcome back to TH Designs, where today we are finally back with episode 6 of the Wheel of Wonders. Of course, a series for those who have not seen, for our new viewers out there, because we have had a lot of new viewers. Thank you very much to all of you. This series is where we let a wheel decide every single aspect of a coaster in this park, and let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. Here is the Wheel of Wonders Park, the Wheel Decides Park, whatever you'd like to call it, which houses all of our abominations, some of them being much prettier than others. But we are coming hot off of the last episode, which is this big Mount Everest Alpenfury looking thing. This is Moroi. The wheel asked for a record-breaking coaster, so this is the new fastest coaster in the world. As you see it just fly up here. If you have not seen this episode, I highly recommend. This thing was a beast. We all thought this polar coaster thing from the previous episode was going to be the biggest in the park, and this just completely outshines it. So I think without further ado, let's just jump into the wheel and see what we're going to be working with in today's episode. So here is our much coveted wheel. This is the thing that giveth, this is the thing that taketh. Last episode it gave us a lot. The previous episode it was very constrained. So we could be cornered creatively, or we could be freed and have all the freedom in the world to do whatever we'd like. It's all up to the wheel. Here is our wheel with all the challenges that we have already used in the first 5 episodes removed. Those being things like the dueling coaster, minimum amount of trains, less than 2,000 feet. They are removed. The record breaker is also removed. That was last episode. With all that said, I think we're almost at like 30 or so, maybe even 40 challenges. You guys have been fantastic at recommending them. I've been consistently adding like 4 or 5 per episode because you guys have such great ideas. And speaking of, we have 4 new ones on this wheel for today's episode. And the first one is that we must spin the wheel twice if we land on this one to have 2 challenges compounded into one. That was recommended by this comment. Thank you for that. The next addition is it must have at least 3 switch tracks, which was recommended by this person. Love that. We do have something similar with the swing launch, but technically switch tracks do not have to be a swing launch, so it is different. Another one was actually not from our last episode, but from my RCT recreation video, and that is that it has to be built in RCT, and it's kind of my interpretation of the comment. You can see it here. Thank you for that suggestion. But the idea that kind of has to be simplified enough to fit within the isometric engine of Roller Coaster Tycoon 1, 2, or 3. So that's a very fun one, and I just realized I skipped one, and that is the last one, the 4th one that we've added in today's episode, and that is no brakes except for block sections, but they cannot slow the train down. That is strictly just so that we can have more than one train. So that's a very difficult one. So with those new ones added, I think it's just about time to figure out what the constraints for today's episode are going to be. Could be one that's 6 episodes old, or could be one of the ones that was just added. No, coaster must be built backwards, station last. Okay, this one has been here I think for 3 or 4 episodes. This could prove to be a very difficult one, but definitely a fun one. So of course, where you would typically build a coaster from the station, lift hill, and you carry the momentum and you build the layout around the momentum, this challenge asks us to build it from the station first, but not with the lift hill next, with the brake run next, and build every single element after that, and pretty much will have us guessing the momentum as we build along, because we also have to think about the fact that we can't test it. There's no way to test it. So this challenge has the potential to be the most difficult yet. So here's our coaster wheel, which has every single coaster in Planet Coaster 2 on it. The only ones that are not here are the 5 that we have already used in the previous episodes, apart from the stand-up coaster, because that was a lost episode. There was no footage of it, so I promised that it would stay, and it is here in case we were to land on it. So with that said, whatever we land on, we have to build backwards, which is pretty rough. I guess if I had a preference, it might be a launch coaster, because then we could adjust the speed, but inverted 2-seater. Interesting. Is that the Giovanola one? Okay, yes it is. So the Giovanni inverted 2-seater is what it's called in-game, as you can see right there. And that is the Giovanola model. So Giovanola was a Swiss manufacturer, which is bankrupt now, as you can see right there, and apparently was defunct in 2004. And if I'm not mistaken, they have connections to B&M, which is why the track looks so similar. Of course, B&M being one of the most popular manufacturers ever. Yeah, here you go. So this whole paragraph talks about B&M. And so 2 Giovanola engineers, Claude Mabillard and Walter Bollinger, they were 2 engineers that said see ya in 1987 and created B&M. So with that said, this model only has 1 existing in the world, but here is Anaconda in Johannesburg in South Africa. at Gold Reef City is the name of the amusement park. And this is the only one, it was opened in 1999, is the only one that's still standing. One of only 3 coasters to be built under the Giovanola, and is the only inverted Giovanola roller coaster. I did not realize that they were this rare to begin with. Yeah, so maybe to help with familiarity, Giovanola made Goliath at Six Flags Magic Mountain, which is almost certainly their most popular one. You probably recognize that one. If not that, maybe you recognize Titan at Six Flags Over Texas. Both of those are pretty famous. But Anaconda is the third one. And I did not know this. I did not know it was the only one. And that's actually very interesting. It's very interesting that such a rare coaster model is in the game. Typically, Planet Coaster sides with more popular models. I think with all that said, we have to figure out where in the park we're actually going to build this. And I know I've been in the past few episodes mentioning this little patch of grass here. And I do really want to build something here, but I think building a coaster backwards, similar to the fastest coaster challenge that we had last episode, I think we need to give ourselves room for error, because there is going to be plenty of it. So I'm thinking actually of building maybe to the left of Colossus here, and then kind of cutting off this space, so that actually whenever we do build a coaster here, we'll also kind of have the added constraint of being constrained by the path. So that could be fun. So I'm going to quickly build some path. I'll cut to that, and then we can place the coaster, do the random number generator to see how tall the coaster is going to be, and I'll be right back. Alright, there's some pretty simple path work done. I extended it to the right here, like we had talked about. Added this little plaza, which is pretty kind of sci-fi-y, so whether or not this stays is up to the theme wheel, but I kind of just wanted to do something a little bit different with these hexagons, because I feel like every plaza more or less kind of looks similar, so just trying to change it up. This patch here, I imagine I'll probably do some kind of floral design, something that you typically see on parks where like they'll put like the park name and flowers, and then I just generally kind of wrap the path around the coaster, so we really have all of this space to work with while leaving this space relatively intact. Maybe next episode or an episode down the line we'll have this space to work with. I don't know where I'm going to put the station just yet, but we'll kind of figure it out, and I'm sure a lot of it will adjust as usual. But I think the next thing to do is to go to the number generator and figure out how tall the coaster is going to be, which ironically will actually be the last thing we'll have to deal with, but will be important for momentum. So here is the random number generator, which is just the basic one from Google, and we haven't done this in a few episodes. The Colossus episode, we decided to overrule the number generator because we were stuck with the tight grid, and then last episode we had the fastest coaster, which was a launch coaster, so it wasn't really that relevant. So it's been a few episodes since we've done this, so I'm going to stick with 50 feet for the minimum and 300 feet for the maximum, and then whatever it lands on is how tall the lift is going to be. Let's see, 206. Okay, so this is a pretty sizable invert. For reference, Anaconda at Gold Reef City, which is the only existing example of this model, is 112 feet. So we're almost 100 feet taller than that. So this is actually going to be pretty large. It's going to be nothing compared to those two, and like I said, ironically, it'll actually be the last thing we have to do, but we do need to know that number so we know how big to make the elements after the brake run. So here is our brake section, which is where we're going to, of course, start the ride. It's just a basic block section brake into another block section and brake. Pretty simple stuff for an inverted coaster. I was hoping to maybe have some kind of like finale helix here that would look really cool, but it's not really up to me. So here is Anaconda, by the way, in Google Earth, and you can see it has a straight brake run. So I try to stay somewhat, in line with that. But I say let's go to the element wheel and let's see what technically our first but last element will be. So here is the main event, which is the coaster element wheel. This is what's going to dictate the entire layout and hopefully do us some favors. There are some really fun things in here, and there are some very damning things in here, as we've seen in some episodes in the past. This has every major element that you see on Coasterpedia, along with maybe some others that were not listed that I added myself, like the dog tongue, which we had last episode, which brings me to the point that there are no elements that have been used in the previous episode. Otherwise, everything else is here because we did reset it last episode. So without further ado, let's see what the first element we'll be working on is, and technically the finale of the coaster will be. Hopefully something not too difficult, like a non-inverting loop. For an inverted coaster, it's very strange. The non-inverting loop is actually an element that's on a fair amount of rides. I think of Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket, which you can see right there. It's exactly what it sounds like, but it's something that I don't think has ever existed on an inverted coaster. Wouldn't really make that much sense to me. So this is going to be a little awkward. So I'm going to straighten this out actually, and our element will be here. Yeah, I'm just going to get working, and we're going to have to see. And we're just going to have our fingers crossed at the end that everything works. Okay, I guess there's our non-inverting loop done, which looks very strange. Typically, the coaster track would be facing up, but it is facing down because it's inverted. So yeah, and hopefully we're at 85 feet in height, and hopefully we have enough speed that's reasonable. If not, we're gonna have to come back and make this smaller, which I have a feeling we'll have to. All right, so there is the non-inverting loop removed from the wheel. I was hoping for a much easier element than that, but we'll see. I'm sure it'll need some touch-ups later. So let's spin it and let's see what's next. Again, I guess hoping for something simple, but the wheel never gives us simple. Oh, okay, that actually is pretty simple. Cobra roll. This is something you definitely see on this model. So what's funny, as we're here on Anaconda and Google Earth, there is no Cobra roll in this model, which is of course the only one out there. But typically on inverts, especially B&M inverts, which eventually Giovanola would kind of become more or less, you would typically see a Cobra roll. If you don't know what a Cobra roll is, here's a shot of it on the Incredible Hulk at Universal Studios. It's a very popular element, and a very popular one, especially on inverted coasters, which you can see here on Raptor at Cedar Point, maybe the most beloved inverted coaster out there. And you can see it here on Alpengeist. It is very popular with inverts. This shouldn't be too difficult. So there's our Cobra roll done. Pretty easy. One of the easier elements on this wheel. We're looking at 92 feet for this one, so gradually increasing in height. Of course, we are at that 206-foot lift hill, which eventually will be over there. And yeah, I also think we have a neat opportunity to maybe have the path go diverge that way and have a moment here where maybe the next element goes over where like the path splits. I don't know. I have ideas and I just need to kind of do them. They probably make no sense out loud. But yeah, pretty symmetrical, pretty happy with that. So I say let's go to the next one. Alright, the Cobra roll has been removed from the wheel, so let's see what will follow it, or I guess technically precede it. Negative G stall loop. I don't know if we've had this one. This might be brand new. Okay, so this is new to me, and I do not think we've had this in the series thus far, which is rare because we've reset the wheel. A negative G stall loop is an inversion that is similar to a Norwegian loop, which we have had before, I think actually twice. Unlike our Norwegian loop, riders enter a twisted drop, then a sidewinder, and then exit in the opposite direction, which you can see pictured there. It is only on one ride, and that is Hang Time at Knott's Berry Farm, which is of course not an inverted coaster. So we're gonna have to modify it to work. I'm gonna look up a POV really quick, because I don't know what this element looks like. Let's skip through and get to the drop, which actually I believe that element right there is our guy. That's what we're looking at. So it looks like a cutback element, which kind of stinks because we just had a cutback element, and back-to-back cutback elements are kind of odd. So it goes up here, swings down. Okay, I see. Okay, so it's actually a pretty simple element. Here it is on Google Earth. Of course, you can see all the very grainy and polygonal track, but the ride drops here and it swoops up and then it turns left and dives down. But instead of doing the same on the exit, it more or less is a sidewinder, where it's like almost like an Immelman kind of thing. Here's the sidewinder that we actually had previously. So basically we're entering as almost like this non-inverting loop, which we actually ironically just had, and then we're exiting very similar to this. So it's not too bad. Here's what our Norwegian loop looks like that we've had before. So it's a mix of this one and that one over there. Now I know I said a cutback to a cutback is kind of odd, but actually maybe it works because it'll send us back this direction, which is where we want to have most of the layout in this spot. So this path, I have no idea what we're going to do there, but this could be interesting. So I'm going to build it to the left here. I was actually just about to start, and then I just realized that we have to build this from the exit first. So we actually have to build the sidewinder element first, and then the kind of Norwegian loop entrance. So I almost built this completely wrong. So the negative G stall loop, or whatever the element was called, has now been removed. Let's see what follows afterwards. An airtime hill, a floater airtime hill specifically, I think is what that's referring to. So I think this is another one that has not been used before. I may be wrong, but we've had ejector airtime, which is pretty self-explanatory, is a smaller version of this. But this is floater airtime, where you're supposed to float out of your seat. So the negative G's should be fairly low, just low enough to get you out of your seat. This is a little funny because it's a inverted coaster, and airtime does not really exist on inverted coasters. I mean, at least not negative G's. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to like peel it to the left here and try and do a floater airtime hill, which is going to look really silly, frankly. But I mean, it's what the wheel wants, so that's what we're going to do. Alright, so there is our floater airtime hill specifically complete. I think it's 110 feet or something around there. 100 and, what does that say, 111 foot tall airtime hill. So to make it floater, we need to make sure that those negative G's are relatively low, and that's obviously determined by how fast the coaster's going, which we don't really have that good of an idea of how fast the coaster's going, because the last thing we're going to do is a lift, so we can't test the coaster. So like we've kind of been talking about, there's going to be a lot of editing that's going to happen after the layout's done. But with all that said, I think let's just build the next one. I had it turn a little bit to the left here to try and fill up some of this area. Pretty interesting layout so far. This is a very unconventional inverted element. There is the floater airtime hill removed from the wheel. Let's see what follows afterwards. Hopefully something that turns us towards the right, I suppose. Butterfly. I don't know what a butterfly is. Okay, so a butterfly is only seen on 2 Vekoma coasters, both relatively old, and essentially it begins like a normal loop. This is per Coasterpedia, but as the track goes up, it twists 45 degrees to one side or the other, and then it twists back, and then it mirrors it, similar to a bat wing, except it keeps going the same way as it began. Let me try and find an image. I think this is it. I'm gonna specifically look up Blue Hawk, which is actually right here. That's the element right there. A very strange one. Okay, I'm gonna look at the POV, similar to what we did before, so we can get a grasp of what this actually is, but I think that's a pretty good image. Okay, so here's our POV. I've actually been on this coaster before. It's at Six Flags Over Georgia. It is a pretty interesting coaster, but our element, which I think you can see it right there on the right. So I think that's it right there. Yeah, all the head choppers on this ride are really good. It's a loop that's basically drawn out 45 degrees. That's kind of the impression I'm getting. This is another element that's not seen on inverted coasters. It's not really seen at all. But let me just try and see what I can do. Okay, I think that's it. I'm not gonna lie, this is one of the harder elements we've had to make thus far in this series. We've definitely not had this one before. I would remember this. I think it's correct. Like, I'm looking at this, it's obviously much more separated, the little loops. Ours are much closer, but I think technically it is correct. It's just a very weird element, and I think it's as simple as that, and I think we're just gonna move on. There's the butterfly removed. I believe that's the third one that was brand new to the series. This coaster is full of them. Let's see what follows. Hopefully something that allows us to turn, but we will see. A batwing. I think if a batwing is what I think it is, it's not unfamiliar to this coaster model. Yes, so a batwing is something that is seen on inverts. I believe this is Montu at Busch Gardens Tampa, one of my favorite B&M invert. It's exactly as it looks like. It's this little heart-shaped element. This should be a pretty easy one. I think we've had this before. So I'm just going to have it turn left, drop, turn this way, and then we will likely be entering this way, maybe for the last element or two before the drop. So that's exciting. Alright, there's our batwing done. Pretty easy, and definitely an element you would see on this model. We're probably going to have to dig a little bit underground there, but overall I think this is pretty nice. I like how it kind of comes from the sides rather than going straight out that way. I think we're lined up pretty nice. We're almost perpendicular perfectly to the station. I'm thinking maybe we can get one more element and then we can talk about how we're going to connect to this 206-foot drop. So there is the Batwing removed. Let's see what will follow, or technically be maybe even the first element on this coaster. Just hoping for an element that can be large enough to be the first element. Incline loop. That's very interesting. I think this is another one we have not had yet. So an incline loop is not something, yeah, it's not on any inverted coasters. It's pretty much what it sounds like. You can see it there at Six Flags Kentucky Kingdom. It's something typically seen on stand-ups and sit-downs. Overall, just B&Ms or Gerstlauers apparently. Overall, very B&M element, but also seen on other things. It's a loop that's tilted to the side. And this isn't something that's typically seen on inverted coasters, but definitely is something that an inverted coaster is capable of. So this should be pretty straightforward, pretty easy. Alright, there's our incline loop done. It is huge. It is ginormous because I'm trying to consider the fact that we have a 206-foot drop coming, so 150 feet immediately after the drop seems pretty fair. We have what? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 elements, more or less what we typically do in these episodes. I would love to get an 8th one and see if we can incorporate it in the drop, because I don't really want to do a typical inverted drop where it like just swoops to the side. I always find those very boring, so I'm going to actually spin the wheel one last time and see if we can get one that we can incorporate into the drop and make it interesting. Alright, the incline loop has been removed. We've had a lot this episode that we have not had before, which is very fun, very interesting. So let's see if maybe we can incorporate the next one into the drop, or if it has to be after the drop. If the wheel kind of lags. Oh, Drachenfire dive drop. Okay, I mean, it is a drop, so we can just make the drop that. That's literally perfect. So the Drachenfire dive drop is named after Drachenfire. Obviously, Drachenfire is an iconic and infamous coaster. As for operating coasters, Steel Curtain is the only one that has it apparently. You can see it right here. That's what the drop essentially is. It's almost like this corkscrew that wraps around. Let me grab a POV so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. All right, so here is the Drachenfire POV. You can see it right there. It's immediately after the drop. That moment right there. Essentially, there's this like pre-drop moment where it's gonna go down, sweep up into this almost corkscrew element, and then sweep a curve around a pretty infamous element on a very infamous coaster. So this should be very fun. I'm thinking, I guess the lift will be coming this way, so I'm thinking it drops, sweeps this way. We'll just have to build it. But this huge sweep actually could be perfect with the incline loop, because it's just going to be like this huge, like 270-degree turn. It's going to actually be very interesting. I also, keep in mind, I have to make it 206 feet, so I'm going to do my best to make that right. Alright, so there is our 207 foot apparently. Let me actually lower that a little bit. There we go, 206 foot drop. So it actually does something that is typically unusual for an inverted coaster, which is a straight drop down. Does that about 50 feet down, then it goes into this corkscrew, almost corkscrew element. Alright, there we go. I touched it up a little bit more so it looks a little bit more reminiscent of the Drachenfire dive drop. Almost looks like a reverse sidewinder kind of element, but this huge swooping turn is so fascinating. I mean, it's literally like a 270-degree wraparound, and the lateral G's on that must be so fun, which is of course what this model is all about. Pretty sweet. I'm a big fan of that, and I'm going to build this little pre-lift section that connects to the station, and I think that'll be it for the layout. And then we're going to ride the test together, which is going to be very rough, and we're going to see what we have to adjust, what we don't have to adjust, and then we can jump to the theming, and we can just about wrap it up after that. Pretty quick and easy little pre-lift section. Maybe we'll add like a little viewing platform here or something for the guests. I believe that just about sums up the layout. So we're going to quickly ride it, and we are probably going to see the worst POV ever. Some of these elements are going to be incredibly fast. It may not even make it through the entire layout. I really don't know what to expect. So yeah, let's just ride it and let's see what adjustments we will need to make. So here's the pre-lift section. This should be pretty straightforward. There shouldn't be anything really needing to be done here. So here we are on the 206 foot drop, about to do the Drachenfire dive drop. Very cool element. May need to lower that, definitely. And then here's that huge sweeping turn, which is awesome. We'll have to shorten that a little bit, but overall not terrible. Into the Batwing, I believe this was. That's a really good speed. Let's see if it exit nice. Okay, Batwing gets the check. That looks pretty good. Here's the Butterfly, the first one in the park. Very slow there. Gonna have to lower that. Second loop is barely made. Okay, so that's definitely going to need to be lowered. We sweep over very sharply into the airtime hill, which actually is not bad for floater. Maybe I'll lower it a little bit, if anything. And here it goes into... This was the 0G stall loop, I believe. Which, that's not the worst entrance. And the exit's not bad. Okay. And then this was, I believe, the Cobra roll, which is going to definitely need some love. Barely makes it through that. Jeez. And then the last element, the non-inverting loop, which I do not think it's going to make through. Oh, no, it doesn't. Okay, we've gathered all the information we need. So, okay, so I've adjusted all the elements to fit whatever areas were too slow or too forceful or all those things. So I lowered the corkscrew like about 5 feet, something like that. Sweeps back around. I lowered this like 20 feet, so that should be nice and snappy coming out of there. Some good lateral G's. Batwing was really good. I just smoothed it out a little bit more. Butterfly came down a few feet. It's 120 now. That should be pretty good. This transition into the airtime hill is fixed up better, so that was really snappy before. This negative G stall loop was pretty good, but I lowered it just a little bit on that entrance, so it's coming in a little bit faster. This Cobra roll I lowered about 10 feet. That should be a good speed. This guy, I lowered it way more. It looks very strange. If it does not make this, I'm just going to remake it. I'd hate how it looks, but that's what the wheel wanted us to do, so that's what we did. I think it should be good. I'm going to test ride it and make sure it's all good. But as for you guys, we're just going to cut over to the theme wheel after I finish all this up. All right, here we are with the theme wheel. Updated to today's episode. We have, I believe, 3 new additions from last episode's comment section that I really like. Those being these 3 up here with, first of all, Apocalypse. There were actually a few people that mentioned Apocalypse or Mad Max, and I really love that idea. Another one was Candyland. I really like that one as well. And then the other one was Tropical, kind of stemming off of last episode, which was the winter theme. So all of these are suggestions that have either been here since episode 1, or most of them at this point are suggestions from you guys. So thank you very much to all of you for that. You guys make this very fun and very interesting. We have taken away, of course, any that we have used in the past episodes, except for Pirates right here, because that was in the last episode. Otherwise, everything that you see here is up for grabs. Let's see what this coaster is going to be themed as. No real preference. Just want something fun. Tropical. Okay. Tropical's relatively simple. It's going to be lots of huts and palm trees and a bunch of brush and rainforest. That'll be fun to do. So with all that said, now we know that the layout is complete. We built it backwards and then we adjusted it after the fact, and now we know that the theme is tropical, which is very interesting. We have not had anything like that. I guess Pirate kind of lends itself a little bit towards coastal / tropical, but when I think tropical, I'm thinking much more of like these tropical trees. Like if you haven't seen the Velocicoaster video, the types of greenery and foliage that you see in that video, that's tropical to me. All this type of stuff. So I'm going to do all the scenery work off camera for today's episode, similar to what we've done in the previous 5 episodes. There have been some little voices and comments that have said that they would be interested in seeing the scenery. I'm going to put a pinned comment in the comment section. Please like or respond to it if you want to see this scenery done in a very similar manner as to the layout. You know, we can do all that. And then for next episode, then I will do it if enough people say yes. This is my little form of democracy, I guess. Otherwise, I'm going to cut over to the final product, and I will see you in a sec. All right, everybody. Welcome back. May I introduce you to Komodo, a very tropically themed coaster. Maybe a different kind of tropical than maybe what you first thought of when we picked tropical on the theme wheel. I thought it could have, of course, went one of 2 ways, and more or less the reason why I didn't go with maybe the typical tropical theme with coastal beaches and things like that is because we had the pirate theme already, which kind of lends itself towards that. This tropical theming is much closer to maybe something you might see in South America or Southeast Asia. You can see some inspiration with all these different kind of temples that you see scattered around, all these ruins. This almost Aztec-like temple that stands here with this fire element, which I'll show you in a second. But overall, I think pretty solid installation to the park. I think the theming is very neat. This huge incline loop is so neat, and it's just this huge swooping motion that then transfers into the Batwing, I believe it was called. It's a very neat coaster. I love the colors. We don't have an excuse very often to use yellow on a coaster. I thought this was a good time to do that, and to give it red trains, as you can kind of see there, with some green. Very neat coloring, in my opinion, stuff you typically don't see. A lot like Deadeye over here with the brown and orange. That was a color scheme that was pretty new and unusual. I really enjoyed that. So this shares many of those. Over here is our, separate from the station, is a little viewing platform where you can see this huge negative G stall loop, I believe is what this element was called. And it dives into this misty pit with this kind of realistic-esque kind of pit that you would typically see on B&M Invert. I think of like Montu. This fire element there, when it banks around, is really neat, and it kind of creates this little vista point with the temple in the back. This is the only element that I think maybe is a little slow, but for being the last, but technically the first element that we worked on, it's okay, because as we know, we made this backwards. This coaster was built from brakes to lift, and that itself is something to be pretty proud of, that it came out pretty solid. The wheel was fairly generous, more or less, with some of the elements that it gave, but I think this is an installment that's pretty good. You can see some custom supports kind of scattered. I try not to go too crazy on the custom supports, because you could of course do the entire coaster custom supports, and I try not to do that, mostly because I just don't find that much enjoyment in it, and maybe I'm alone on that in the Planet Coaster community, but I just don't enjoy coaster supports that much. But when there are quirky or unusual supports, which the Giovanola invert does kind of have these very thick and unusual coaster supports, I try and replicate those to keep some essence of realism, and I use them kind of scattered. What you really see them on is the loops for this model, but I added this kind of custom, this really big one for this negative G stall loop. I think that's really nice. Yeah, they look a little strange, but that's how it is in real life. So as for everything else, it's pretty self-explanatory. This kind of stone ruined station is kind of what we went with. Pretty well done. The interior isn't the most decorated, but the outside is good enough for me. And then, like I mentioned before, we have all these kind of temples that were really inspired by something you might see in Southeast Asia. Actually a pretty modest entrance, but I really like how the path kind of weaves in and out of the terrain, which of course is the big selling point. You see some grass kind of going over, but it's more immersive. The pathing is intricate and interesting. I tried to make it a little bit different than what we've seen in previous episodes, but to be honest, other than that, I don't think there's anything else that I'm missing. Maybe we could talk about the stats. The stats are actually pretty bad, and I'm not quite sure why, because look at all the red for the excitement, and I can understand the incline loop because it's a little drawn out, but for this butterfly, I'm really shocked that it's this low. So the stats aren't actually the greatest on this ride, but yeah, I'm not quite sure. Yeah, the fear, this is the fear. The fear is green everywhere, but it's only 3.9. Maybe the lift is ruining the stats here a little bit, but I feel like this coaster deserves a little bit better stats than it's getting. But with all that said, let's jump over to the cinematic and the POV. But yeah, this should be fun, and thank you all for the love and support that you've recently been giving me. That RCT video did extremely well, and that's all because of you guys, so I'm very thankful for that. And do expect more. Do expect more of these, of course, the Wheel of Wonders. If you have not seen the other episodes, do check them out, and always keep your eyes peeled for the next episode, and I hope to see you there. Until then, take care, everyone.